72 hours after I moved in, 3 figures crossed my lawn like a marching band, with clipboards. Heels ticking on my dock, pearls catching the light, and the woman in front said it like a sentence handed down from a bench. You have 72 hours to dismantle this structure, and I just stood there with my first box still in my arms, looking past her at the piling sunk deep into the bay, thinking structure. Sure, that's one word for it. My name is Mason Hart, and I didn't cash out of a decade in biotech press. The button watch 47.8 million hit my account, just to fold because someone waved bylaws at me. I came here to touch wood and water, and quiet, not to get lectured about neutral paint colors for docks. The house I bought was a weathered 2-story on Windward Bay. North Carolina cedar shingles, salt in the air. Gulls arguing like old neighbors, and attached to that deed were words that hooked me harder than the ocean ever could. Riparian rights, recorded easements. Blue Harbor Maritime Group established 1986, and a widow named Lillian put the house keys in my hand, then a heavy ring of boat keys in the other, and said, "This place isn't just a home," which at the time sounded poetic. You know what I mean. That first night I walked the pier, end to end with a beer and a stupid grin, and what I saw wasn't a backyard finger of boards. It was muscle. Thick planks, bolted to pilings like they had roots, armored. Conduit, humming breaker boxes labeled for loads. A residential circuit would never need capped lines that breathed diesel. When I cracked one loose, and I laughed a little crazy because this wasn't a deck for kayaks. This was small marina infrastructure hiding in plain sight. Boats drifted past like they were checking on an old friend. A charter slowed, a pair of trawlers hugged the shoreline. Then a Coast Guard cutter glided by with that quiet nod. Crews give a familiar landmark, and I felt the weirdest thing, like the water remembered me before I even learned its name. Inside a desk drawer held Blue Harbor files, fueling inspections, storm reinforcement receipts, photos of men in rain gear with dates stamped in the corner. And if you think that made me nervous when Linda, president of the Seabright Shores HOA, marched back down my pier in her blazer and pearls, with 2 board members and a tablet already recording, you'd be right, my stomach did a slow roll, but my feet didn't move. Section 11. Sub-Article 3, she said. Crisp as a fresh bill. Residential-grade docks. Only neutral paint vessels. Under 24 feet. You are non-compliant, and I leaned on the rail and asked real gentle. Linda, when was Seabright Shores founded? And she said, 1996, like a quiz show answer. And I nodded and said, and this pier was constructed in 1986. And she didn't blink. Our bylaws apply retroactively. And I almost smiled, because that's not how property works. That's how stories people tell themselves work. I wanted to snap to match her volume. But I've learned the hard way that yelling is a gift you hand to bullies. So I prepared instead, called my cousin Nate, who teaches admiralty law and treats footnotes like baseball stats. He said, you need Dana Whitaker, a maritime attorney who speaks in receipts, and I scanned everything. Like my life depended on paper. Closing docks, old Coast Guard letters, fueling certs with state seals, Lillian's maintenance logs. And then, one afternoon, Dana called with a voice that sounded like the tide turning Mason Blue Harbor. Maritime is still active, 53 commercial slips. Licensed fueling standing training agreement with the Coast Guard through 2032. And another thing, the entire Seabright Shores subdivision sits on a 98-year ground lease recorded in 1996. The landlord is Blue Harbor. Which is, congratulations. You and I sat at my kitchen table with cold coffee and a dog sighing at my feet and said, so when she threatened liens, she was threatening her landlord. And Donna said, that is in fact the picture. Yeah, that happened. Bullies don't retreat. They rebrand, so 3 days later, Linda stood in front of hydrangeas and microphones and told the local news. This wasn't about a dock. It was about safety and families and fuel lines near backyards. Every word polished to sound like she was saving us from me, and it might have worked if a reporter from the Windward Gazette hadn't followed the money, pulled the filings, and posted a headline by dinner that said exactly what the math said. HOA president declares war on her landlord. Subdivision built on Blue Harbor ground lease. And neighbors who'd practiced looking through me at the mailbox started offering tight waves like truce flags. Linda doubled down with flyers about exploding fuel lines and radio spots about children and noise, and I didn't take the bait. I let paperwork speak because the truth is boring until it isn't, Dana said. Let her pick the battlefield. So we let Linda call an emergency HOA session in the community hall that smelled like church coffee and old carpet, and we showed up with a stack of documents that made the room colder by 2 degrees. Linda's attorney ran a slideshow with arrows pointing at my breaker boxes like they'd discovered contraband. Unsafe, unfit. Unwanted, big letters, gasps in the cheap seats. And when he finished, Dana walked up without hurry, heels clicking like a metronome, and said, "What you just heard was an emotional story. Unfortunately, it was fiction." And then she put the deed on the projector. Blue Harbor Maritime Group established 1986, predating the subdivision by a decade Coast Guard letter confirming training authorization through 2032. And finally, the ground lease. 98 years, starting 1996. Seabright Shores is built on land. Leased from my client, she said. Interference with marina operations has already caused documented damages north of $100,000, and personal exposure for President Crowell may exceed $230,000. And I swear, you could hear the sound of a room changing its mind. We brought witnesses because truth deserves company. Big Joe Ramirez, charter captain. Button-down shirt, calloused hands. Been fueling here since '88, safest station on the bay. Elena Park. Operations, lead flipping maintenance logs with tidy signatures. Inspections, passed lines. Certified the HOA's interference cost us contracts and wages, and a Coast Guard officer who didn't grandstand, just said, "Blue Harbor is an authorized training site dismantling would jeopardize readiness. We advise against further disruption." And the slideshow guy suddenly had nowhere to point his arrows. I stood. Because some things you only say standing. I moved here for quiet. You brought cameras to my lawn, and fines to my mailbox. You called me greedy while I learned how this place actually works. And I pointed not at Linda, but at the paper. This pier didn't join your neighborhood grew around this pier, and while you waved bylaws, you forgot who owns the ground you're standing on, and it didn't feel like a mic drop. It felt like a keel settling into water. Donna slid a motion across the board table, like a tired teacher collecting notes. Censure for cause, rescind all actions against Blue Harbor, schedule a special election per bylaws. And the room voted not because I was charming, but because paper has weight, and the gavel dropped, and Linda's title slid off her shoulders like a coat that never fit. And we did not throw a party. In the hallway that smelled like too many people, Linda got close enough that I saw the chip in her front tooth. "You humiliated me," she said. "I will sue. I will appeal. We'll go to the state. I will sit on every couch they have." And I told her, calm as I could manage, "Do it. Tell them you tried to tear down a federally authorized marina on land. Your neighbors rent from me. Tell them how many hours and dollars you spent defending an illusion." And she turned and walked out with her pearls tapping the rhythm of a retreat. And a week later, she announced she was stepping down for personal reasons. Which is one way to say, the room stopped believing you. The funny thing is, what satisfied me wasn't her fall. It was the temperature dropping in the neighborhood. People stopped flinching at shadows shaped like clipboards. Kids laughed by the water again. The interim chair. Marcus Lee, a city planner who speaks like a grown-up, came to the marina and said, "We need to stop pretending we're enemies." So we drew a line on paper, not a wall. HOA handles, lawns and lights. Blue Harbor handles, water. And work, we added solar to the warehouse roof. Filtration to keep runoff out of the bay. Opened the classroom on Saturdays for knot tying and navigation. The Coast Guard dropped off a box of compasses. Big Joe hired 2 teenagers and taught them to coil lines. Without cursing too much, Elena labeled a shelf things that outlast storms, and I stuck a photo of Lillian there because gratitude should live somewhere you can see it. If you're waiting for me to brag about crushing someone, that's not this story. Because power rooted in anger collapses. Power rooted in knowledge endures. And the only reason I won is because I slowed down. Read the deed, asked better questions, and refused to hand my dignity to someone who needed it more than I did. You know what I mean. The twist is simple. The HOA thought they owned the stage, but the stage sat on my lease. And once the lights came up, the audience changed sides, and the ending, if you can call it that, is satisfying. In a grown-up way, the gavel fell. The interference stopped, the neighborhood exhaled, and we got back to work. But here's the open question that keeps the comments spicy. Did I just flex paperwork to win a fight, or did I protect something bigger than my ego? Are HOAs defending communities or defending control? Where's the line between order and overreach? Tell me what you think. Tell me if I went too far or not. Far enough. Tell me about the Linda in your life and how you handled it. Drop your story, argue with me, push back, hit subscribe. If this hit a nerve, because the next tale might make your HOA drama look tame, and I want to hear you in the comments when it does.